Hi, welcome to Reading with Reese's. My name is Jennifer. So today I wanted to talk about my reading stats for 2016. This year I read 107 books, which is 37 more than last year. I read 70 in 2015. And, I was like, how did I end up reading that many more books, you know, in just a year's time frame? And so I thought about it, and I switched jobs in January of 2016, and I'm in the DC area, so I was taking the metro at my previous job. And, I had 2 dedicated hours every single day to reading. And, I didn't read on weekends very much, nor in the evenings, because, like, oh, I have this time set out, during my work day, my commute to read. And I focused on other things when I was home. And when I switched jobs, first my commute went from an hour and 15 minutes to just 15 minutes. I got 10 hours of my life back. And a direct consequence of that was that, well, I no longer had those 2 hours of dedicated time every day to, just dedicated to reading. And so I was sure that I wasn't even going to hit 70 books. So this was, this was an interesting contradiction of what I thought was going to happen. I thought I was going to read a lot less than I did. And I think what did actually happen is, because I didn't have that dedicated time during the day, I had to be more mindful of, well, okay, Jennifer, you're not going to watch that TV show right now. You're going to pick up a book. Oh, I don't feel like I've been reading that much. I'm going to read during lunch. I had to be more, present on, okay, I'm going to use this time for reading instead of, for something else. So just turns out that I happened to read a lot more, and that was completely, contradictory to what I thought was going to happen. But anyway, let's get started on my stats beyond just the number of books. Out of the 107 books that I read last year, I read 78 fiction books and 29 nonfiction books. So 78 is essentially 73% fiction out of the 107, and the 29 nonfiction works out to 27%. So out of those 78 fiction books that I read last year, 57 of those were romance. That works out to about 73%. An interesting metric between 2015 and 2016 was, out of my total reading, which were 70 books that year, 40% of what I read was romance. This year, it ended up being 53%. So I think what happened was I read several 9-10 book series this year that I didn't necessarily do that the year before. So out of the 78 fiction books, my non-romance reads totaled 21, which works out to about 27%. I didn't break those 21 books into, their subsequent genres, just because they were pretty much all over the place. I had, some YA, some fantasy sci-fi, and it just was gonna be a little too parsing, I thought, to do that. So I just kept it at romance and non-romance. Out of those 57 romance books that I read, 27 were historical, 24 were paranormal, 4 were contemporary, and 2 were kind of sci-fi-ish. This works out to, kind of what am I have, primarily read romance wise, since I started reading. I've always really loved the, Victorian and Regency, England historicals. So, I'm not surprised that that is, that's the bigger category. But then also those big series that I read this year were primarily paranormal series. So I'm also not surprised that that's my second biggest category. I'm hoping this year to bump up my contemporary reads. My next set of stats regards the format that I read my books in. So I read 59 books on my Kindle. I read 25 physical books, and I listened to 23 books on audio. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that I read mainly, via ebook this year, because I primarily read my romance novels on my Kindle. So that doesn't really surprise me. On one level it does, because I can't take my Kindle to work with me. So, I read all of my romance on, in the evenings and on the weekends. So it's just a little bit surprising. I was expecting more physical books read this year. Mainly because, hey, I take them to work. I try to read during lunch. And, so I was just kind of surprised at there being such a wide gap between my ebooks and my physical books. My audiobook listening was essentially non-existent in 2015 because I was commuting via Metro, and I read either on my Kindle or a physical book on the Metro. So, I didn't do much audiobook listening. And now that I have a bit of a drive, I listen on the way back and forth from work. So the last stat that I want to go over is authors. And I track whether the author is male or female, and also I track how many authors of color or foreign authors that I read. So out of the 107 books I read this year, 94 of them were written by women, which doesn't surprise me at all, because, hey, I read mostly romance this year, and romance is written primarily by women. So, this metric makes a lot of sense. Then male authors, I read 13 books written by men. That's 12%. I think that it is important to support women, and women's writing and women authors. So, I'd say this statistic has probably stayed pretty consistent over the last several years of my reading. For, authors of color and foreign-born authors, I read 13 books, which hits about 12%. This is lower than I really want it to be. One of my goals this year is to read more own voices. So, I'm really hoping to bump up that metric a little bit. So, because I think it's important to expand my horizons. And I'll actually, since I've mentioned a couple of my goals in this video, I will go ahead and link to my 2017 reading goals in the show notes below. Well, there you have it. Those were my reading stats for 2016. I definitely have some things that I was surprised about, other things that made a lot of sense. I would love to hear about some of your own reading stats. Do you track your reading? What are some of the shelves that you have on your Goodreads? Anyway, I hope you have had a great weekend so far. It's Sunday, so I hope you have a good start of the week, and I will be posting another video on Wednesday. All right, bye.